Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full time thanks to your generous support, shares and views with multiple uploads every week to help share the rich history of monsters, locations and mythologies of D&D. Today we concentrate on the Drider. One cannot talk about the Driders without talking about the Drow elves, of course, because all Driders were once Drow. Also, side note, dear artists, Drow society is completely matriarchal. The women are larger and stronger than men in most cases, so instead of this being the stereotype of the Drow fighter, it's understandable given the literature, actually this is far more likely to be the case. Okay, rant over. Drow society is devoted to intrigue, assassination, subjugation and fanatical worship of their evil spider goddess Lolth. It is that religion that dominates their culture and is the root cause of why Driders exist, as well as why they have a ruling matriarchy. Well, the Drow do. The Drider was introduced to the D&D game in the first edition of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. In the game, they are Drow which have been transformed from the waist down so that they have the lower body of a huge spider. This transformation is a punishment for angering Lolth or failing a task that Lolth has set for them. As those involved in religious activities are more often the subject of Lolth's direct attention, it is often priests and clerics of Lolth, or those who seek Lolth's favour, that more often become the victims of this vile transformation. And if I can go off script for a minute, the sacrifices and givings and all of the rituals and things that Drow do to gain Lolth's favour, they don't do it out of the goodness of their heart, they don't do it out of charity, they do it because they feel like they're buying Lolth's favour, and their returns from Lolth's attention should always be greater than what they've sacrificed. Greek mythology is full of tales of this sort of monstrous punishment inflicted on mortals by the gods, and it's most certainly it is a cursed existence. Lolth is not doing this to create a sub-race of spider people. When she transforms the Drow, they lose any capacity to reproduce. At least physically, they possibly could do it magically. However, Lolth's motives are capricious. She seems to be obsessed with strengthening and constantly testing the Dark Elves, turning them into the twisted tools of her vengeance on the other elven gods and the less perfect races of the Underdark. And from the Drow's point of view, all races are less perfect. You can see this, some of this attitude contained in the proclamation she utters to a Drow just before the transformation begins. Your failure has proven you too weak to represent the race of the Drow. I therefore sentence you to the form of the Drider. The first Drider was created in the very first years of the Drow's existence. Lolth, a Drow in the service of Lolth, who was bribed into stealing Lolth's platinum egg. This happened in the adventure called Queen of the Spiders. When Lolth learned of this treachery, she turned Lolth into a Drider, and this was such an effective demonstration to her subjects that now, to ensure a finer racial stock of Drow, Lolth tests all Drow of promising ability who worship her. Failures result in Driders. Lolth is rumoured to still survive in some remote area of the world and may be more powerful and dangerous than other Driders. They've certainly had a long time to accumulate power and allies. Upon reaching 6th level or thereabouts, a promising evil Drow is summoned by Lolth to the Drow homeland in the underworld. So this is why you should beware if you decide to play an evil Drow character, because you're subject to this as well. When he or she is brought to the Abyss for this testing, Lolth there puts the Drow through a specially devised test, and it's probably uniquely crafted to every individual Drow to prey upon what Lolth detects as their weaknesses. Those Drow who fail the test become Driders and are dropped back off into the prime material plane in random spots. A high priestess of Lolth's favour can request that those who do not obey her as Lolth's representative and agent are also transformed, and thus those transformed may be mentally enslaved to that priestess. But otherwise, Driders do not live among or serve the Drow. They serve Lolth, and they hate her for it. Part of this attitude is the massive pride of the Drow. They see Driders as failures, and Driders see Drow as constant reminders of their suffering. So it would be unlikely to find any Driders in the company of any Drow unless they are directly serving a priestess of high level or have some other very good reason for being there. They're not comfortable in each other's company. Once a drow becomes a Drider, it seeks the seclusion of caverns and tunnels, mostly to psychologically come to terms with its new existence and its new cravings, avoiding contact with others as much as possible out of shame, hatred and fear. Due to ill feelings about its failure and its bloated appearance, the Drider becomes totally self-centered. They would rather keep the company of giant spiders than any humanoids, except perhaps the mutant chitanes or etacaps. Driders prefer lairs where there is plenty of warning of intruders and a safe way to exit out the top or the back, usually up a twisting shaft, down a sloped tunnel, or out along the sheer wall of a rocky chasm, where it's difficult for pursuers to get a shot at them, and extremely difficult to chase them. At the entrance to the lair, they'll stock up on shrieker fungus, or at least a magical alarm that signals them mentally if disturbed. From this lair, they send out their giant spider minions to scout out for prey, then venture forth to feed their lust for the vital fluids of other beings, preferably drow, or other humanoids. Driders need to consume blood every 4 days, just for dietary requirements. They can store it and ration it out, but hunting prey is really all that gives their life meaning anymore, so they spend a great deal of time tracking down and hunting for prey. If they can combine this with searching for and acquiring magical items and magical knowledge to protect themselves, all the better. Drow retain their ability to cast spells. Even former clerics of Lolth can still cast her spells, and that alone says a lot about the goddess's attitude towards Driders. They are hers. Often it is the most ambitious, vicious, and capable members of Drow society that are set up and fail the Spider Queen's test. So she has created for herself, slowly and steadily, a horrific force of monsters that have little choice but to spread her evil and at the same time serve to test the Drow for weaklings and stupidity. Driders like to lay traps. They can spin webs and also use magic or other monsters to capture their prey. Turning to the monster manual for 5th edition, we see that they have an armor class of 19 without the benefit of body armor, so we often see the upper body of a Drider still clad in some medium armor, such as scale. Perhaps they can push their armor class up past 20, but I would suspect that they would simply use magic to protect themselves and keep all the mobility their new form gives them. They have 13 d10 plus 52 hit points, giving a range between 65 and 132 hit points, which is a wide variance to play around with. For instance, you might provide a weak, starving, injured Drider for a random encounter, but a fully fit, healthy and experienced Drider for a serious fight at the end of a quest. Driders do attempt to lure prey to them using all sorts of tricks, and I'll talk about that in a minute. They can move across webs with no problem, also across the ground, walls or roof of the Underdark home with equal ease at 30 feet per round. They don't need to make climbing checks. They have dark vision out to 120 feet and a passive perception of 15, so they're hard to sneak up on. You may want to have them lay out long, sensitive web strands that adventurers must avoid disturbing, as the Drider will feel any vibration from the strands and be able to pinpoint the party's exact location. Like Drow, they prefer to observe from concealment up among stalactites and send skirmishers such as huge beetles and giant spiders who drive the fight into a confined space with very difficult terrain or further traps, and then, when the prey is weakened and occupied, the Drider will strike from a safe distance using spells and their longbow. They were once Drow, so they still have their Fey ancestry, giving them advantage on saving throws versus charms and immunity to sleep. Plus, they have been trained in Elven and Drow weapons from a very early age. Also, they always have the inherent spells of the Drow they can cast, with Darkness and Fairy Fire once per day, and Dancing Lights at will. They usually know a decent array of spells, have a spellcasting attribute related to the type of magic they use, of 16, and count as 7th level spellcasters, with the following being a typical array of spells that they have prepared. Of course, you can vary this as you see fit. Particularly Driders who are expecting a fight will craft their spell list accordingly. So they have Poison Spray and Thaumaturgy at will, Bane, Detect Magic and Sanctuary with 4 1st level spell slots, Hold Person and Silence with 3 2nd level spell slots, Clairvoyance and Dispel Magic with 3 3rd level spell slots, Divination and Freedom of Movement with 2 4th level spell slots. There is no reason why they could not have access to ritual magic, potions and spell scrolls, magic wands, rings and magic weapons. They may also seek out and learn spells that enhance their giant spider allies, such as Enhance Ability and the Enlarge Reduce spell. In combat, they make 3 attacks per round with their longsword or longbow, and they can use one of those attacks to make a venomous bite. All attacks are +6 to hit. The longsword and bite have a 5-foot reach. The sword does 1d8 plus 3 slashing damage one-handed, or 1d10 plus 3 if the Drider is using both hands. The bite does 1d4 piercing damage plus 2d8 poison damage. However, it doesn't cause any other debilitating effects. They typically keep their arrows slick with a coating of their own venom, and the bow range is 150 feet close range and 600 feet maximum range. Arrows do 1d8 plus 3 piercing damage, plus 1d8 poison damage. So this says a few things about the poison, that it doesn't survive very long out of contact with the drow itself once it's been released, as the damage on those arrowheads is only half of what the bite damage would be. That also says to me that they inject the poison with their bite, which means they have hollow fangs that they can inject the venom through. Note that there is no saving throw to reduce the poison damage, so feel free to describe just how nasty that stuff is. It's probably like acid, just rots the flesh when they inject it. Driders often employ devious tactics. They emulate the light of a torch and the clumsy sounds of surface dwellers to draw in would-be predators, who swiftly go from being hunters to being the hunted. They have known to call out for help to adventurers, even lure them down into the Underdark by distributing false treasure maps and rumours all the way across the surface world. Driders may even communicate via magical means with young wizards, offering to tutor them in magic, meeting up with them at a secure location where the apprentice comes to a swift and sticky end, probably wondering in their last thoughts why they just stumbled into a giant spider's web. Dragonlance features Driders in the adventure published in 1991 called Wild Elves, where the story of Jaiathuli, an imprisoned princess of the Abyss, is told. The Driders are not native, but visitors from another world sent by Jaiathuli as part of an invasion. What world do they come from? We don't know. Perhaps Faerun. In the Eberron campaign setting, Driders exist as creatures independent from Drow society, because Volkor, the principal deity of the Drow in Eberron, has an affinity for scorpions rather than spiders. The conceptual role occupied by Driders is instead filled by Scorro, a creature with the lower body of a scorpion and the upper body of a Drow. The Forgotten Realms commonly features Driders, and Driders are found in the forests of Mer and Kalimshan up on the surface. Rumours report that the Drider transformation process is overseen by demon Yolchlols and performed by priestesses of Lolth. In the novel The Legacy by R.A. Salvatore, Driz's sister Vienna transforms her own brother, Dinandurden, into a Drider due to his lack of faith in Lolth. The City of the Spider Queen adventure contains a number of encounters with Driders, including Giorgrani, a Drider vampire. Also, there is reported to be an actual community of Driders who dwell near the Drow city of Tlinhet, who call themselves the Forgotten Ones. In the Greyhawk campaign setting, the Castle Greyhawk somewhat slapstick adventure, the adventurers encounter the amazing Drider Man, who is a huge Drider wearing a red hood. Hardy ha ha. In the Ravenloft setting, the Dark Lord's accessory suggests that there may be Driders below the surface of the domain of Arak. The Ravenloft Monstrous Compendium Appendix 3, A Creatures of the Darkness, details a Drider version of a Drow Lich, and maintains that Driders will worship vampire Drow, most likely because such a creature spends as much time hunting and killing Drow as they do. Finally, in the Pathfinder campaign setting, Driders are not Drow punished by an evil deity, but have instead been punished by other Drow through a method known as flesh crafting. Drow sometimes tolerate the existence of Driders, sometimes they hunt them down and kill them, but it really depends on the current ruling priestess of Drow, of Lolth, and what she thinks about the situation. In any dealings with them, though, you can be absolutely sure that both are prepared for double-crossing the other at all times, and neither ever trusts the other. Like, subscribe, check out my Patreon for some exclusive content and all the full scripts for these videos, buy some merchandise, wear your geek with pride, check out Patron Blades for a mighty smooth shave, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.